I'm Caleb.
I'm Jeanette, and this is Shirley Mental.
Ugh. Wow, that was a really, really bad time to yawn. Welcome back to another episode of Shirley Mental. Today's going to be a little bit different because it's just me today. You're stuck with me. Jeanette is away for personal reasons. I am drinking just water. I don't have a fancy tea, which is just one of the other weird things about this episode. So I'm just drinking water. I encourage all you girlies, gays, and theys to drink your water, stay hydrated, because it's really important for you. I know this sounds really silly, but drink your water, do it. Because literally, I kid you not, there are times where you're super sad, you're super depressed, and you want to not be around anymore, and it turns out you were just dehydrated. So this is, like I said earlier, Jeanette is not here. It's just me, and this is a very weird situation. I've never done a solo recording, so it's just me sitting in a room talking to this microphone, which is very unusual. But anywho, today that was a hootenanny introduction, really long one. Today we're going to be talking about the difference between being alone and being lonely. Valentine's Day happened recently. Each time that this day comes around every single year, it brings a whole potluck of emotions. Because I am not dating anybody, I'm not in a relationship with anybody, and I'm also not looking to be in a relationship with anybody. But personally, for me, Valentine's Day is one of the weirdest holidays. It doesn't really serve a purpose, and I feel like everybody's like, you got to do the fancy things. You got to buy the roses, the other kinds of flowers, the chocolates, the kisses. And it's like, yeah, okay, I get it. You guys are in love. Good for you. But if you truly love somebody, you're going to love them more than on just Valentine's Day. And for me, it gets to this point where it's like, are you doing all the things to check off the boxes so you can be like, look at me, I did this whole Valentine's Day thing? Or is do you truly love them? I guess what I'm trying to say is, are you doing the Valentine's Day things because you love them or because you feel like you have to? I feel like there's this huge societal pressure around Valentine's Day where it's like, do this, do that. If you don't get me flowers, you don't love me, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that's not true. And you saying things like that and acting that, or maybe even thinking that, is kind of a bit narcissistic in my opinion. I never gave an introduction, and I am just realizing that now, because this is what happens when you get a solo show with Caleb. Things go off the rails. I gave you a little bit that we're going to be talking about lonely versus alone, but we're going to talk about how you can spot the difference, what they mean, and explain the struggles on loving the hardest person out there in the universe, which is yourself. I feel like that's such a line. Yourself. You are always the hardest to love because you always put those standards in front of you. Like, you hold yourself to the highest standards, and that's ridiculous. But there's no easy way around that. What does it mean to be alone? So I'm going to start off by reading the definitions of lonely and alone. Lonely is you are sad because you have no friends or company. And alone is having no one else present. Alone is more of a physical state, like you are physically alone. It is just you. There is nobody else in the room. Whereas lonely is more of an emotional state. Like you feel lonely, which is generally associated with alone, but they're not really the same. Again, with the societal urges and the societal desires, right? I mean, you are told ever since birth, really, that you are just waiting to find this perfect one and this person that's going to come into your life and be your soulmate and be that everything. And that is just not true. Yeah, maybe in some cases you do have this whole fairy tale thing where it's girl meets boy or boy meets boy, girl meets girl, oh, I saw them at a bookstore and fell in love. Good for you. You know what? If you can do that and you can exist in that reality, applause for you, person. But generally, you have to work for it. And you can't really start to build relationships with other people until you have built a stable relationship with yourself. So you need to have trust in yourself and you need to be vulnerable in yourself. And that is scary for a lot of people. I don't know about y'all, but like, there's times when I'm just like alone with my thoughts, and that can be scary sometimes. And it's almost normalized that this alone with yourself is this scary thing, and it shouldn't be. Yeah, your thoughts can be scary sometimes, but they're also you. So you need to embrace that and you need to find a way to work with that and kind of coexist with your brain and your thoughts. And this also can require building up confidence. When people think of confidence, it's like going out into that sports game and, oh, I have confidence. I'm going to win. I'm going to hit the ball. I'm going to score those goals. But confidence can also literally be just being okay with being. You don't need other people in your life, particularly, to help you. It's kind of like you can't. There's a Bible verse about it, because there's a Bible verse about it, and I'm not really sure what it is, but it's like you can't help other people. You can't take the sticks out of other people's eyes until you take the log out of your own. I'm not sure exactly where that's found, but I'm pretty sure it says it in there, and this is a great example of that. How can you be expected to build relationships with other people if you don't even have a comfortable relationship with yourself? That is a whole tangent, but being alone is a physical sense, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. You're alone more than you realize, and you have to become okay with being alone. I'm gonna talk more later about how you can get into that, but for now, we're gonna talk a little bit about loneliness. Loneliness is different from being alone, as in I said earlier, alone is a physical state, loneliness is a mental state. Some examples of loneliness might be you go to a movie and it's a really good movie, and then you want to talk about it with your friends after, but there's nobody there to talk to. And you suddenly feel lonely because it's just you. Your memories are less memorable when you do something alone than when you do it with friends. I mean, when you go to an amusement park or go hiking or wherever, those memories that you're creating are memories of the people that you were there with, not like the physical location. So loneliness is longing for something, or that something could be different for everyone. Loneliness isn't the same. But loneliness, I think, comes from misunderstoodness. Kind of like misunderstood is the root, but loneliness is the mask that's covering it. And because again, if you don't understand yourself, how are you going to understand other people? How can you begin to empathize and all that fun stuff? And loneliness doesn't have to be associated with being alone, because you can be in a crowded room and still feel lonely. And that in itself is a form of disconnection, because yeah, you're physically there, you're physically present, you're surrounded by all these people. So why on earth should you be lonely? But if you're not there mentally and you don't have a good mental state of being, then you're not really there at all. And so, yeah, you are going to feel lonely, even though you're with a bunch of people. So that is another reason why loneliness is different than being alone. This lonely factor is what contributes to all this bad mental health. So you hear people talking about it all the time, that humans are sociable creatures, and we are sociable creatures, right? You should have your friends. You should have those people to talk to. Even if you don't have like a hardcore friend, coworkers are still people to talk to. We as humans are sociable creatures, and we need people to talk to. And it doesn't always have to be on that deeper level, but we need to get out there and we need to talk to people. So being alone is okay. But being lonely is kind of the, again, mental side of it. So of course it's going to affect your mental health. So you might be like, okay, well, maybe I'm alone, but I'm not lonely. So there's this question where is it possible to be alone but not lonely? And the answer is yes. Because you can do whatever you want, whenever you want, and you don't need to cater to other people when you're alone. And if you have a people pleaser kind of aspect of yourself, you can just throw that out the window when you're alone, right? If you have to go pee, you can go pee. If you want to go eat at a Chinese place, you can go eat at a Chinese place. There's nobody else whose expectations that you have to meet. However, this is kind of a teeter-totter situation because you don't want to develop trust issues. It can be this thing where it's I'm only with myself, so I only trust myself. And yes, it is okay to not trust people to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, if you have friends, you should trust them and you should find those people in your life that you trust. So we've talked about how loneliness is different than being alone. But I've mentioned earlier that we need to become comfortable with ourselves. And I'm going to call that the process of falling in love with yourself. When you think about love and you think about relationships, a lot of the times your mind goes to romantic or sexual relationships with another partner. However, you can also have relationships with friends. Those are both forms of relationships. Not a lot of people talk about relationships with yourself. So nobody is going to care more about you than yourself. And this is part of the reason that you hold yourself to such a high standard. I mean, think about it. The things that make you mad that you do, you would never put that on another person. That is you. That is your problem. And you're always going to hold yourself to the higher standard. And that is because nobody cares more about you than yourself. You have to allow your body to have a conversation with your thoughts. This conversation sometimes isn't a good one. You know, a lot of times people have bad thoughts. We talked about this earlier in an intrusive thoughts episode. But bad thoughts are okay, and they're important to acknowledge that they are there so then you can cope and find ways to work around it. But in this kind of symbiotic relationship with yourself, you also can have good thoughts, positive thoughts. And these are things we should focus on because a lot of times the negative thoughts take over a greater mind space than the positive thoughts. And positive thoughts about yourself are fantastic. Like, there are times when you look in the mirror and you're just like, oh my gosh, I am stunning today. And you might think it's a little corny to look in that mirror and be like, I am awesome. I am perfect. But it works and it is great. You don't want to lie to yourself, but it is perfectly acceptable and amazing to have these good conversations with your thoughts, with your brains, to become okay with being you. But there's also content conversations. There are these thoughts that you have that aren't good, and they're not really bad either. They're just there, and they're just okay. And that's that. You're going to have this, and that can lead to a spiral. But we're humans, right? You can be okay with being alone, but eventually you are going to get lonely. And that's okay as long as you're able to seek out the help you need and you're able to find connections again. You need to find balance in your life. You need to have these super extroverted moments where you're going and talking to people. And then you also need to have those moments where you're listening to a sad playlist on Spotify, writing poetry alone in your bed at 3 a.m. You know, it's all about balance. There's also these times where you're having this emotion and there is just no words kind of in the English language to describe how you are feeling. And that is another reason why falling in love and forming this connection with yourself is so important, because sometimes literally nobody else in the world can understand you and only you can do that. And therefore, because of that, you need to kind of put your foot forward and do it yourself, because nobody else is going to get it done for you. Not because they don't want to, not because they're not good people, but because they just don't understand you. Also, this one's kind of like a scary thought, but you can never escape yourself. You're going to be stuck with you until you end. So you need to work up the courage to accept yourself that only you know. Only you are going to know your true self, and you're only going to find that true self when you are sitting alone and reflecting on life. You need to form these good thoughts and these good conversations with you, because if you don't, I mean, you're going to be stuck with you forever. And if you have a bad friend, right, you're not going to keep them around. You're going to get rid of them. But you can never escape yourself. So you need to do it good. There are a ton of YouTube videos about this. The art of being alone, the art of being alone, not lonely, etc., etc. Some of the good ones that I recommend is this one by Dustin Vong. I hope I'm saying that last name right. About Let's Not Talk About the Art of Being Alone. And then by Zoe Unlimited, The Art of Being Alone, Not Lonely. I will link those in the show notes, and I highly recommend that you guys go and take a listen, take a watch, take a gander, because they're really good. And you can learn a lot. And I would also encourage you to find a hobby. You need hobbies in life. So whatever that may be, however silly you think your hobby is, if it works for you, great. And you need to find that hobby and go out and just spend time with yourself. And you need to be able to connect with yourself. Because if you can't connect with yourself, then how on earth is someone else going to be able to connect with you? How are they going to love you if you can't love yourself? One thing that you can do to kind of help with this ability to be alone and be by yourself and not feel lonely is to do things by yourself. Go to concerts by yourself. Go on a hike by yourself. Go to a movie that you really like. Take yourself out to dinner. These things are kind of seen as absurd in the world, but if you can go out there and you can trust yourself and you can find confidence and courage in yourself, then you got this.
Thanks for tuning in. Shirley Mental is a weekly podcast released on Mondays at 3 p.m.
Don't forget to follow us at Shirley Mental Podcast on all socials. This is Caleb.
And Jeanette.
You can find us personally on all socials at cable_2431.
And at Jeanette Ireland. This was Shirley Mental. See you next time.